Over the past 2 weeks on the podcast, we've talked about the nervous system and how to set goals that work with it instead of against it. And this week, we're diving into something that might surprise you. Your nervous system actually loves routine. Even if you think you hate routine, even if you consider yourself someone who rebels against structure, understanding this piece might change everything. Welcome to Binge Eating Breakthrough, the podcast to help you stop feeling out of control around food and build trust with your body. If you've tried everything but still feel stuck, you're not alone. I've been there too. I'm Jane Pilger, and I'm here to help you see binge eating in a new way so you can finally break free. Each week, you'll get the tools and insights to create peace with food and your body. Your breakthrough starts now. Hello, trusted listener. I consider you a trusted listener because I trust that you're willing to look at things you might have resisted before with fresh eyes. I trust that even if you've told yourself, I'm not a routine person, or I hate structure, you're open to understanding why your body might actually be craving exactly that. Today, we're talking about rhythm and routine, and specifically why they matter so much for your nervous system. Now, I know some of you might already be feeling resistance to this topic. You might be thinking, I don't do well with routine, or structure makes me feel trapped, or every time I try to create a routine, I rebel against it. Now, you might be on the other side too. You might love routine. You might be somebody who is like, yes, I do so well with routine, but as soon as I don't have a routine or something goes against my routine, then all bets are off. But here's what I want you to know. If you are somebody who's in more of that kind of resistance or rebellion around routine, it's information for us. It's your nervous system communicating something important. And by the end of this episode, I think you are going to understand not just why routine matters, but how to create rhythms and routines that feel supportive instead of suffocating. So let's start with the nervous system piece because this is the foundation for everything else. Over the last couple of weeks on the podcast, we've talked a lot about the nervous system. 2 weeks ago, we kind of talked about what does the nervous system have to do with binge eating. And then last week, we talked about the nervous system and using that in our approach towards goal setting. What we want to remember about the nervous system, that command center in your brain and your body, that two-way command center, right? It is always scanning from your body up to your brain and your brain down to your body. It's always scanning internally and externally, and it has one job, and that is to keep you safe. And one of the primary ways it determines whether you are safe is through predictability. When your nervous system knows what to expect, when it has a sense of what is coming next, it can relax. It doesn't have to be on high alert, scanning for danger, wondering what might happen. Think about it this way. Imagine you're walking through a forest and you have no idea where you are, no idea where the path leads, no idea if there's danger around the next corner. Your nervous system would be on high alert, right? You'd be vigilant, tense, ready to react. You would be in that above home base state, ready to either fight or flee, depending on what you encountered. Now, imagine you're walking through the same forest, but this time you know the trail. You've walked it before. You know what's around each bend. You know how long it takes. You know where you are, where you're going. Your nervous system can relax. You can be in home base, in that grounded place in your nervous system. You can actually enjoy the walk instead of being in survival mode the whole time. This is what rhythm and routine do for your nervous system. They create predictability. They let your nervous system know what to expect. And when your nervous system isn't constantly having to figure out what's happening or what's coming next, it can stay in home base. It can stay regulated. Now, this is especially important when it comes to food and eating. Because if you don't have any rhythm or routine around when you eat, how much you eat, or even where you eat, your nervous system has to work harder. It has to constantly be making decisions. Decision fatigue is real. Every time you have to decide, should I eat now? What should I eat? How much should I eat? That takes energy. It uses up resources in your prefrontal cortex. But when you have some rhythm and routine, when your body knows you generally eat breakfast around the same time, or that you sit down for lunch instead of eating while standing at the counter, or that you have a little ritual before dinner, your nervous system can relax into that predictability. Those decisions become easier because they're not coming from willpower or control. They're coming from rhythm. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Some of you are hearing this and thinking, but I hate routine. Structure makes me feel trapped. Every time I try to create a routine, I end up rebelling against it. Now let's talk about that rebellion because it's so important. First, I want you to consider this. Even if you think you don't have routines, you probably do. You might not have routines that you consciously chose. You might not have routines that serve you. But if you look closely at your life, there are patterns. There are rhythms. Maybe you always scroll on your phone first thing in the morning. Maybe you always grab coffee on your way to work. Maybe you always eat lunch at your desk. Maybe you always binge at night after everyone else has gone to bed. These are routines. They're rhythms. Some of them might not be the routines you want, but they exist, and your nervous system has learned to expect them. This is really important to understand. Your nervous system finds safety in patterns, even if those patterns don't feel good to you consciously. So when you say, I don't do well with routine, what you might really be saying is, I don't do well with routines that feel rigid or controlling, or that someone else imposed on me. And of course, that makes complete sense. Because remember, your nervous system perceives restriction as threat. So if you create a routine that feels like a rigid set of rules, you must do this at this time in this way with no flexibility, your nervous system is going to eventually rebel against that. Not because routine is bad, but because rigidity triggers your threat response. This is the key distinction. Rhythm and routine are not the same thing as rigid rules. Rhythm and routine can actually have a lot of flexibility built into them. And when they do, they work with your nervous system instead of against it. I did a whole podcast episode on this concept that I called supportive structure. The idea is that structure, having some framework, some rhythm, some predictability, is actually supportive to your nervous system. But it has to be the right kind of structure. Structure that has flexibility. Structure that adapts to what you need. Structure that serves you rather than controls you. So let me give you a concrete example. A rigid rule around eating might be, I eat breakfast at 7 a.m., lunch at noon, dinner at 6, every single day, no exceptions. If I miss one of these meals, eat at a different time, I've failed. Can you feel how that creates tension? How your nervous system might resist that? Because there's no room for life to happen. There's no room for you to tune in to what you actually need in any given moment. It's all external control. But a rhythm with flexibility might look like this. I generally eat 3 meals a day, spaced a few hours apart. I try to eat breakfast within a couple hours of waking up because I've noticed my body does better when I do. If I'm hungry before lunch, I eat a snack. If I'm not hungry at my usual dinner time, I check in and see what I need. Maybe I eat lighter, or maybe I wait. See the difference? There's still structure. There's still rhythm. Your nervous system still has predictability. It knows you're going to nourish yourself throughout the day. It knows roughly when to expect food. But there's also flexibility. There's room to attune to your body's actual needs, and there's space for life to happen. And this is what I mean by supportive structure. It's not about rigid rules. It's about creating enough predictability that your nervous system can relax while maintaining enough flexibility that you don't trigger rebellion. So here's something that I see happen all the time. People resist creating any routine at all because they're afraid it will feel restricting. So they live in total chaos, no rhythm, no predictability, constantly making decisions in the moment, constantly feeling overwhelmed and dysregulated. And their nervous system is exhausted from all that unpredictability. But they resist routine because somewhere along the way, they learned that routine equals restriction. Maybe they grew up in a home with very rigid rules around food. Maybe they've tried diets that had strict meal timing. Maybe they just internalized the message that having structure means you're being controlled. But the truth is, the right kind of rhythm and routine actually creates more freedom, not less. Because when your nervous system isn't constantly in decision fatigue mode, when it isn't constantly having to figure out what's happening next, you actually have more capacity, more energy, more bandwidth for the things that matter. The other thing that happens so often for people is they end up in this either I'm eating all of the food or I'm eating none of the food. And that is very threatening to the nervous system. It doesn't know. Am I going to get to eat again? I don't know. If you're not feeding me enough, then when I do get to get food, I'm going to get as much as I can because restriction famine is coming again soon. So if your pattern, it still is a pattern. If your pattern is I'm either eating nothing or I'm eating a lot, or after I eat a lot, I don't eat anything to make up for it, you are unconsciously keeping yourself in this pattern for two reasons. It's kind of that routine, and it's the nervous system responding to, I don't know, this may be a threat. I may not be getting food again, so I'm going to get as much as I can now. So let me share some examples of rhythms and routines that can support your nervous system, especially around food. A morning routine that helps start your day in home base, that place in your nervous system where you are grounded, regulated, calm, connected. Now, this doesn't have to be elaborate or time intensive. It could be as simple as wake up, drink some water, do a few minutes of stretching or deep breathing, eat breakfast sitting down instead of rushing. The specifics matter less than the fact that your nervous system knows what to expect when you wake up. A rhythm around meals. Again, this doesn't have to be rigid timing, but having a general sense of when you eat, morning, midday, evening, gives your nervous system predictability. It knows it's going to be nourished. It doesn't have to go into that threat response wondering when food is coming. A transition ritual before meals. This could be taking 3 deep breaths before you eat. It could be setting your phone aside. It could be saying something you're grateful for. It could be simply pausing for a moment to check in with yourself. This creates a rhythm that signals to your nervous system, we're moving into eating now, and helps you be more present. A transition ritual after meals. This is just as important as the before meal ritual, but often overlooked. This could be taking a moment to notice how you feel. It could be clearing your plate and taking a few breaths. It could be going for a short walk. It could be simply sitting for a minute before jumping into the next thing. This signals to your nervous system we're complete with eating now and helps you transition out of the meal instead of staying in eating mode or immediately moving into stress mode. An evening routine that helps you wind down. Maybe you have a cup of tea. Maybe you do some journaling. Maybe you have a consistent bedtime. These rhythms help your nervous system transition from the activity of the day into rest mode. Now notice, none of these are rigid rules. They're rhythms. They're patterns that create predictability while still allowing for flexibility. And here is what is really powerful. When you have these supportive rhythms and routines in place, when your nervous system has that baseline of predictability, you actually have more capacity to handle the unexpected because your nervous system isn't already maxed out from constant unpredictability. Think about it like a bank account. If you are constantly overdrawn, constantly in the negative, any small unexpected expense is going to put you over the edge. But if you have some money in your account, if you have some cushion, you can handle those unexpected things without going into crisis mode. And it's the same with your nervous system. If you're constantly in unpredictability, constantly having to make decisions, constantly in chaos, any small stressor is going to dysregulate you. But if you have some baseline rhythms and routines that keep you regulated, you have more capacity to handle stress, to handle change, to handle the unexpected. And this is especially important when it comes to breaking patterns you don't want, like binge eating. Because binge eating often has its own rhythm and routine, even if you haven't consciously created it. Maybe you always binge at night. Maybe it's always after a stressful day. Maybe it's always when you're alone. These are patterns. These are rhythms. Your nervous system has learned to expect them, and in some way, it finds safety in that predictability, even though the behavior itself doesn't feel good. So when you want to change that pattern, you're not just trying to stop a behavior. You're trying to disrupt a rhythm that your nervous system has come to rely on. And that is why it's so hard. Your nervous system perceives that disruption as threat because you're removing something predictable and replacing it with what? Uncertainty? That doesn't feel safer to your nervous system. This is why it's so important to replace an unwanted rhythm with a new rhythm, rather than just trying to stop the old pattern. You're not just taking something away. You're giving your nervous system a new pattern to rely on, a new source of predictability and safety. So for example, if you tend to binge at night, instead of just trying to stop binging, you might create a new evening routine. Maybe you have a cup of tea at a certain time. Maybe you do some stretching. Maybe you journal, call a friend, do a puzzle. You're creating a new rhythm, a new pattern that your nervous system can start to expect and rely on. And anything that involves movement, that involves both sides of your body, both hands, it's very powerful. Knitting, playing an instrument, walking, any sort of movement. So powerful for your nervous system. Now, at first, this is going to feel uncomfortable because remember, your nervous system likes familiarity. Even if the old pattern didn't feel good, it was familiar, and familiarity equals safety to your nervous system. So when you introduce a new pattern, there's going to be resistance, and that's normal and expected. It is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. And this is where consistency becomes so important. You're teaching your nervous system a new rhythm. You're building a new neural pathway, and that happens through repetition, through showing up to that new routine over and over again, even when it feels awkward or uncomfortable or like it's not working. And eventually the new rhythm becomes familiar. The new pattern becomes the one your nervous system expects, and what once feels like effort starts to feel automatic. But here's the key. The new rhythm has to feel supportive, not restrictive. It has to have flexibility built in. Because if it feels rigid, if it feels controlling, if it feels like another set of rules you have to follow perfectly, your nervous system is going to rebel against it. This is why I say work to create rhythms and routines that work for your life and with your life, not against it. Don't try to force yourself into someone else's idea of what a good routine looks like. Create rhythms that actually support you, that actually feel good in your body, that actually help you stay regulated. And be willing to adjust. If a routine you created isn't working anymore, if it starts to feel rigid or confining, change it. The goal isn't to create a perfect routine and stick to it forever. The goal is to create enough predictability that your nervous system can relax while maintaining enough flexibility that you can attune to what you actually need. Now, I want to come back to something I said earlier about rebellion, because I think this is really important for some of you. If you notice that you rebel against any routine you try to create, I want you to get curious about that rebellion instead of judging it. What is the rebellious part trying to protect you from? Is it trying to protect you from feeling controlled? Is it trying to protect your sense of autonomy? Is it trying to protect you from the disappointment of not being perfect? Often, rebellion against routine is actually rebellion against rigidity, against control, against the threat of restriction. And if that is what's happening, the answer isn't to force yourself into routines anyway. The answer is to create rhythms that feel like support instead of control. Rhythms that you choose. Rhythms that serve you. Rhythms that have flexibility built in. Rhythms that help your nervous system feel safe rather than trapped. And sometimes the rebellion is actually protecting you from your own perfectionism. You create a routine, and then if you don't do it perfectly, you judge yourself. You criticize yourself. You feel like you failed. And so your nervous system learns that routines equal judgment, equal failure, equal shame. And no wonder it rebels. So if that's you, the work is to practice creating routines while also practicing self-compassion when you don't follow them perfectly. Notice I said when, not if. To separate the idea of routine from the idea of perfection, to allow rhythm and flexibility to coexist. Remember, the goal of rhythm and routine is not to create a rigid structure you have to adhere to perfectly. The goal is to create enough predictability that your nervous system can relax, to reduce decision fatigue, to build in patterns that support you staying regulated. And that can look different for everyone. Some people need more structure to feel safe. Some people need more flexibility. Some people need a combination, structure in some areas, flexibility in others. So the invitation is to get curious about what actually helps your nervous system feel safe. Not what you think you should do, not what works for someone else, not what you saw on social media or heard in a podcast, but what actually helps you stay regulated. Maybe you do better with more structure around meals and more flexibility around movement. Maybe you need structure in your morning routine, but flexibility in your evenings. Maybe you need rhythm around sleep, but flexibility around when you eat. There is no one right answer. There is only what works for you and your nervous system. And here's something else to consider. Creating rhythm and routine is itself a practice. You are not going to get it perfect right away. You are going to try things that don't work. You are going to adjust. You're going to learn what your nervous system responds to. This is part of the process. It's how you build trust with yourself. You experiment, you notice, you adjust, you try again. And slowly over time, you create rhythms that actually support you. One more thing I want to say about this. Rhythm and routine are not just about food and eating. They apply to all areas of your life. Your sleep rhythm, your movement rhythm, your work rhythm, your rest rhythm. All of these patterns create predictability for your nervous system. And when you have rhythm and routine in various areas of your life, it creates a foundation of safety that supports everything else. When your nervous system knows when you're going to sleep, when you're going to eat, when you're going to move your body, when you're going to rest, it can relax into those patterns. It doesn't have to be on constant alert trying to figure out what's happening. Now, I know that figuring out what rhythms and routines actually work for you can feel overwhelming. And you might be wondering, where do I even start? What should my routines look like? Why do I keep setting routines and then not following them? This is exactly the kind of work that I do with my one-on-one coaching clients. We look at your life, your patterns, your nervous system. We create supportive structure that actually works for you. Not generic advice, not what works for someone else, but rhythms and routines that fit your life and support your nervous system. And if you're someone who keeps trying to create routines but finds yourself rebelling against them, we work with that too. We explore what the rebellion is protecting you from. We create different kinds of rhythms, ones that honor both your need for structure and your need for freedom. So if you're interested in this kind of support, I'd love to talk with you. You can schedule a breakthrough call with me at janepilger.com. I'll put it in a link in the show notes. And it's a free call. We can talk about what you're struggling with and whether one-on-one coaching might be a good fit for you. Now, here's what I want you to take away from this episode. Your nervous system craves predictability. Even if you think you hate routine, your body actually needs some rhythm and structure to feel safe. But the key is creating rhythms that have flexibility built in. Rhythms that feel supportive rather than restrictive. Rhythms that you choose rather than rules that are imposed on you. And if you find yourself rebelling against routine, get curious about what that rebellion is protecting you from. Often it's protecting you from rigidity, from control, from perfectionism. And the answer isn't to force yourself into routines anyway. It's to create different kinds of rhythms, ones that honor your need for both structure and flexibility. So start small. Pick one area where you could benefit from more rhythm. Maybe it's your morning routine. Maybe it's how you transition into meals. Maybe it's your evening wind down. Create one simple rhythm that feels supportive, that has flexibility built in that you can practice consistently. And just notice what happens in your body when you do this. Notice if your nervous system starts to relax into that predictability. Notice if you have more capacity, more energy, more bandwidth when you're not making every single decision from scratch or constantly reacting to what's happening around you. And remember, you are building new neural pathways. The new rhythm might feel awkward at first, and that's okay. It's expected. Keep practicing. Keep showing your nervous system this new pattern is safe. It's supportive. It's here to help, not to control. And over time, that rhythm will start to feel more natural, more automatic, and you will have created one more way that you're working with your nervous system instead of against it. That's what I have for you this week. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Binge Breakthrough. You can find the show notes and any resources mentioned at bingebreakthrough.com. If you like this episode, subscribe to have future episodes delivered to you each Wednesday. And remember, your 5-star rating and review will help others discover these life-changing concepts. See you next week.